course, the mega ships pose huge challenges to ports. This is clear. Not only in terms of infrastructure, but also in terms of peaks, in terms of risks for the supply chain. So this is clearly one of the big challenges that ports have to face, that they're now working on to a more or lesser extent. Of course, ports are really struggling to work with this, but they'll have to. And this is the reality of container shipping now. At the same time, I think ports also have a role actually in somehow putting these risks into the open and talking about it, discussing together about what should be the future. Because I think what is underestimated is that ports also have actually quite a lot of market power, and they could influence also this discussion. Of course, in terms of infrastructure, you see several ports that have adapted, have built new, bigger terminals that are mega ship ready. This is let's say the very basic thing to do, but something that will continue over the coming years. But then there's a lot of other things that you could think of that are maybe even more important, which is trying to even out the peaks of these mega ships that arrive with a lot of cargo, and I think that is going to be the real challenge in the coming years. Of course, it is about information. If information flows are better aligned and you know exactly at what point cargo arrives, you can of course make sure that the flows of different transport actors are better, better aligned, better in line with each other. But it's not only, I think, about information, it's also actually about how long is the port open, who works 24/7. And then you talk about ports and terminals, but you also talk about a lot of other actors that need to cooperate with it as well. Is customs going to do 24-hour inspections? Are logistics warehouses open 24 hours and in the weekends? And I think that is at this point the main constraint for evening out the peaks from ports as quickly as possible. Well, I think what's happening in terms of ship size is related to what's happening in the industry and then also in ports. So you have mega ships that lead to mega carriers with mega alliances that call it mega ports. I think there's a clear relation there. So in a way, it is kind of inevitable, you could say. Then the question, is it a good thing? I personally think for a lot of people it actually isn't, for a lot of actors. For the shipper, for example, it's not a very good thing. It limits their choice. For the shipping lines themselves, it's kind of a necessity now to share the slot capacity and make sure that these mega ships can actually be filled. For ports, it's very dangerous, because that means that there's only a few alliances that have very large chunks of cargo that they can swift quickly from one port to another. And I think this is what we're seeing actually now. Suddenly, it's not an exception that more than half a billion TEUs are suddenly from one port to another. So I think that poses a real risk for the return on public and also private investment. Yeah, we did an analysis on it, and I'll actually show a slide just later, where it's very clear. In the last years, you see very large swings of these cargo flows. They were much smaller a couple of years ago. I think there are basically two large developments taking place. The first one is the declining growth rates of emerging economies, in particular China, and this has a huge impact on, let's say, the world GDP growth. That is one. And the second is that, contrary to the last decades, GDP growth doesn't lead to much higher trade growth. That was something of the past. 1% growth of GDP leads to 2.5% of trade growth. Well, now it is actually 1-to-1. So that means that the container trade growth is really going to decline. The same growth rates that we had a couple of decades ago are no longer going to be normal. Well, when looking at global trade, of course you see economic developments like a decline of the growth rates of China, but you also see, I think, something more, let's say, more about the values, about how people consume these days. And I think what you see is consumption patterns that might actually favor more local goods, more local food, for example. You see consumption patterns that might actually change the number of goods that are consumed, like if there's going to be much more car sharing, or is there going to be much less cars produced and transported. And then there's also something about how, let's say, people that live close to ports have different conceptions about what a port should look like, and in particular how much nuisance they are willing to tolerate. And I think if you add up all these kind of value changes, I think that could have also an important impact on trade and the willingness to accommodate these in ports. Well, how do we resolve the, let's say, the trade-off between trade and the environment? First of all, I think it's important just to take a lot of these environmental effects of trade into account in the price. So that sounds easy, but of course it's a very difficult process. But it means, for example, that if you ship a lot of goods, you have emissions. You need to somehow take this into account in the price of a good. And that's the whole debate, I think, about shipping and climate change. And I think there need to be important steps in this direction, so that people also see that it's possible to have global trade, shipping, while at the same time not making the environment worse. Of course, it's certainly not easy, and we see that happening now. The discussions about shipping emissions and how difficult it is actually to progress on that, to advance on that, but it's necessary.
Are you encouraged at all by the progress that has been made, or conversely discouraged by the lack of progress?
Well, I think steps have been taken, but certainly more needs to be done.